manifestation of it. And
Right.
you won't do that until you speak in tongues.
Right.
Really? Okay. And then there's the other idea that in this day and age, people speak in tongues, and it's just gibberish.
Right.
It's not a language. It's just people speaking gibberish. But in every book of the Bible where we have people speaking in tongues,
It claims of speaking
they're
in tongues.
speaking to people
Right.
who understand what they're saying.
Right.
They're not just going, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
and people are going, whoa, I can understand that. No.
No.
They're talking in other languages.
Yeah.
And that would be akin, I guess, to, Ron falls out of a plane and lands in Uganda. He doesn't speak their language, but he starts speaking whatever they speak.
Yeah.
Tongolese or whatever, I don't know.
Or I speak English and they understand it.
They even worse. Or better, whatever.
Same thing. Same
thing. Yes,
know?
the miraculous interchange
See, I've always
languages.
took the speaking of tongues to mean they just understood each other
No.
in different languages.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's
Yeah.
not a... But see, the Pentecostals will tell you, well, that's a secret prayer language. You're praying to God.
Mm-hmm. He's giving you a message, but you don't know how to understand it.
Exactly. No. No. And Paul
Jory
talks
went
about
to
that
Royal
a lot.
Rangers, and they were very Pentecostal. And I went to it because it was like, oh, cool, a little camp thing at church, whatever. All right, cool. So we went, and they were huge about the speaking in tongues, and it was around this big campfire, and I was just like, oh boy, this is just too cult-like.
Dude, I've seen them when I was a boy. I went to a Pentecostal church, and I used to see them take people and everybody gather around and put their hands on them and they're like praying in tongues, and it's like, come on, man, go, go, go. And it's just like, I'd see in their faces, they're like so wanting to speak in tongues, they just start speaking gibberish.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm in.
Yeah, I'm in the club.
I'm in the club now. I can speak gibberish.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But no, that is not what it means at all. And we can also see that in the book of Corinthians. There's a whole bunch of instruction on speaking in tongues in Corinthians. But no, that is not what happened here. And as a matter of fact, what's curious and interesting is every time you see people speaking in tongues in this Bible, it's the same exact context. There are
people from all over.
Yes.
That don't understand each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not only that, they're all Jews.
Right.
Every time it is...
They're all believers.
Yes.
We're
Hebrews.
Jews.
Hebrews.
Yes.
Okay, so here's the curious thing. Every time somebody speaks in tongues in this Bible, it is a sign to unbelieving Jews that salvation has reached beyond the unbelieving, beyond the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Saying this is a sign to the Jews that the gospel is reaching out everywhere, because they didn't believe it. They didn't know. They don't buy any of this stuff. We are the people of God. We've already got everything. It's locked in.
If you're not born into it, you're not in.
Right. If you're not born into it, or you don't become a proselyte and do everything that we say,
right,
you are not in.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be circumcised. I don't care if you're 40 years old. You're circumcising yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You got to do the dietary laws. You got to do everything that the rabbis say.
Mm-hmm.
The Pharisees. Not just the rabbis, the
right.
Pharisees, because they ruled the religious structure. So that's what they're saying. No. But the apostles are saying, yes. Here is a sign from God that shows you that the Spirit of God is moving outside of your little camp.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And they would have people speaking in tongues. Every single time people spoke in tongues, there were unbelieving Jews there.
Gotcha.
And it was a sign to them that their God had overflown their bounds. Their God was breaking out of the box that they had put him in. He was squeezing out.
And said, no.
Sorry. And they said, no, this is not our God.
Yeah.
And he said, yes, this is your God.
Yeah.
He is busting out of the box you put him in.
Yeah.
And so, that is what the gift of tongues most assuredly was for. I mean, obviously, under any circumstance where language is involved, it's about speaking the truth to people who maybe you normally wouldn't be able to speak to, and then people standing aside listening to this and going, what in the world is going on here, being more encouraged about it. So that's another idea that really needs to be brought out in all these discussions about tongues, is that every single time it happens, it's language, and there are unbelieving Jews there saying no.
Right.
Every single time. And so, with many other words, he kept testifying to them. And so we'll continue here. Here's something interesting in section, verse 42.
Mm-hmm.
They were continually, all of these people who had believed, were continually devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. Everyone kept feeling a sense of awe, and many wonders and signs were taking place through the apostles. And all those who had believed were together and had all things in common. And they began selling their property and possessions and were sharing them with everyone as anyone might have need. And day by day, continuing with one mind in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord was adding to their number day by day those who were being saved. This is one of the only... This is the scripture that people often come to right there, that little section, to say that's the first century church.
Mm.
That is the first century church.
Because they were together and they broke bread and they
sold all their stuff and they lived as communists.
Right.
They lived as communists, is what it's basically saying here.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting idea. The disciples practiced communism.
Yeah.
Right there in Israel.
They sure did.
They sold all their stuff and gave everyone according to what they had need of. Now, I must make a comment here that this is probably the only instance in human history when communism actually worked. Do you know why?
There was no greed.
Uh-huh.
Everybody gave.
That's right. That's the only time in history that I'm aware of where communism worked. Where these people were filled with the Spirit of God and had not a selfishness bone in their body.
Well, and there was no leader of the men being a man.
True.
That's where communism fails, because there's
true.
Always a dictator.
Well, in that there's one leader who forces on the people
Correct.
this idea.
Right.
Now,
and
this is from the people.
Right.
Straight up. And
Right.
they got together and lived as a commune, basically. And that's delightful. That's delightful what happened there. And I think that'd be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You know? I think that'd be awesome if you had a religious community and everybody worked and they just threw the money into the kitty and everybody got what they needed. And hey, that sounds great if there's no selfishness.
Right.
And if people aren't saying, well, I need this, and they don't really need it. It's
Right.
just like, I want that.
Right.
This is the only time that this has ever worked.
Well, in today's world, it can't.
I don't think so.
Well,
clearly. It has never worked.
I can't say can't. I shouldn't say
It will.
can't. Yeah.
But not until these things are cleaned up.
Yeah.
But this is where a lot of Christian pastors come to say, well, this is what the first century church looked like. And that's partially true for this group of individuals in the city of Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get to the other parts in this back here in the same book where we're talking about home churches. And that's more than likely what was going on.
Gotcha.
If you could meet in the Jewish synagogue, they did. Because a lot of those Jewish synagogues believed. And they became Christians.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically, they just, not converted, but kind of. They used to be just Jewish synagogues, and now they are churches.
Right.
Where, and you got to realize also, in this book, the word church does not appear anywhere. It's always ecclesia or the Sabbath.
The Sabbath.
The synagogue.
Oh,
Excuse me, synagogue. Yeah. So they met at a synagogue or at a home church. They didn't really build these huge buildings and churches until the Middle Ages.
Sure.
But this is, but you can see the beginnings of it, where they begin to have things in common, and then a little bit later we'll see them having a little house church. But some of those congregations of the Jews would have converted and believed in the Messiah and became a messianic fellowship. Others would kick the Christians out.
Gotcha.
Said, no, you get out of here.
Right.
And so they had to form home churches and do other things like that. But this is the beginning of it. And I think that's a good place to stop.
Indeed.
For that. Excellent discussion today. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.